Hello, and welcome to my first ever production breakdown where I will be breaking down Voicemail by Aimee Vant. So this song came out a couple months ago, and I got a lot of questions about the production, specifically the sound design. I'm going to start off with the intro here.
It'd be cool to bring that into it, sure. But I can't even conceptualize ever seeing Unreal anymore. Yeah. So
Everything going on in here is actually pretty simple. I wanted it to sound a little bit like a crappy radio. I have this white noise going on in the background, some filtered out acoustic guitar. And lastly, I actually secretly recorded Aimee, Sissy, and Zoe, who were the other two writers on the project. And this is what that sounds like.
I don't know, it'd be cool to bring that into it, sure. But I can't even conceptualize ever.
So that's the chatter you hear in the background. As for the fill at the end of this, basically just some voicemail beeps from an actual phone. Some formatted voicemails. Moving on, we have verse 1. Here's what that sounds like.
You'll probably delete this when you see it.
Alright, and here, aside from Aimee's vocal, which is obviously the star of the show, we have this main synth. Alright, here I have it rendered to audio, and the automation you're seeing here is from Soundshifter, which is a Waves plugin, and I just decided to kind of mess with that a little bit towards the beginning of phrases to give it a little bit of pitch movement. Here is the preset that I used in Serum. So it is actually a Steve Aoki preset called Bass Punk, and I think you can download it off of Splice. What I did was I messed with the envelope. So originally it sounded just like a plucked bass, but I turned the sustain all the way up so that it got held out. And then I mapped the LFO to this filter right here, to the drive knob on the distortion, as well as another filter at the end of the effects chain, just to keep some of that high end in check. I set this LFO shape here to 1/8 notes, and that's where the movement's coming from. Other than that, in verse 1, all I have are these little synth melodic hits, which I don't have the preset for because I froze and flattened them already, but it's literally just a sine wave in Serum that I put Devil Lock by Sound Toys on and distorted the crap out of. I also did some verb throws from Aimee's vocal, and I put Portal on her lead vocal with a bunch of random different presets and got these cool little vocal tidbits. Pretty much just ear candy to fill out the gaps. So moving on to the pre-chorus, this is what it sounds like.
If you're looking to apologize for leaving me stranded in a different country down the street from your parents just to spend my New Year.
Alright, this is what's going on here. We have a bunch of Aimee's harmonied oohs that sound like this. That's basically matching the rhythm of the main synth that you also hear in verse 1. I put a vocal chain on here, just compression, EQ, more compression, OTT, and then an LFO tool that is also hitting at 1/8 notes. This is what it sounds like without LFO tool. So all those bends you actually hear in the harmony itself came from Aimee's real life performance. She actually sang the bends into the harmonies. We figured that that would be the most realistic way to do it. So yeah, that's pretty much what's going on in the pre. Moving on, we have the chorus.
Tell it to my face.
I'll start with the bass hits. This is what the bass hits sound like soloed. Basically just a bunch of layered crap. We're going to start with the guitars. Two different recordings, pan left and right, and I put guitar rig on each one of them on this Solo Maker preset. Turned all the reverb and delays down. And then I put Devil Lock on that group of guitars just to give it some extra bite. Fun fact about these guitars is we left in some of the chucks here right at the end because it kind of sounded like somebody putting down a phone. Then I rendered these guitars to audio and pitched them up an octave, and this is what that sounds like. Basically put OTT, EQ, the Ableton stock amp on the heavy preset here. and then wider. That just gave the guitars some extra bite. So those together sound like this. Next we have a Trillion sub bass. So basically use the Clicky 106 sub preset from Trillion and put some extra decapitator here just to give it some bite. So to add a little more chordal information in here, I actually took the synth preset from the verse and extended it out and distorted the crap out of it, and this is what that sounds like. So all together we have this. Layer that with some drums, Cashmere like stomp, like one of those stadium stomps, and a kick. This is what that sounds like. Basically just really working off of the rhythm of those impacts. In the middle here, I still have that little melodic synth hit. The difference in these is that I add a little reverb throw here, which is in the automation you can see, so that it's kind of like expanding and getting bigger as it goes out. And aside from that, we stacked a ton of Aimee's vocals. It gets bigger in the second chorus, and I'll talk about that more later. All right, moving on to verse 2. This is what it sounds like.
You treated me like someone who deserved it.
This is what the drums sound like soloed. Now what's interesting about the drums is I put standard clip on the group of drums and just kind of clipped and saturated the crap out of them so that when the kick and the snare hit at the same time, it creates this kind of crunchy effect on the snare, and you can hear that here. I also layered the snare with this little pitch snare thing, which is basically just a little glitch that Aimee actually sent me as a part of her stems. All the fills you hear in this are actually Aimee's voicemails. I just kind of messed around with them and used them as little fills in the production. You can hear that here. So a bunch of those just going on to fill out more gaps. So for the synths in verse 2, I actually layered an additional synth on top of the main synth you hear in verse 1 to give it some extra high end. This is what that synth soloed sounds like. So these are actually Serum presets I downloaded from a bass house DJ named Cage and just kind of mess with them. He's got some crazy sounds, so go check him out. A little bit about how this works. So I copied the LFO from the first synth and put it on here, mapped it to the reverb filter, and then I mapped it to a bunch of other stuff in here, including the EQ and another filter. One of the main things I learned off of these synths was the reverb filter. If you move it around, it changes the timbre of the synth. So this is what it sounds like in that position. Then I'll move it around. Super wild, but cool trick to use in Serum just to give your synth some different sound qualities. Lastly, in verse 2, I have a bass playing in the background. This is what it sounds like soloed. This is literally just a Serum bass, and I took a sine wave and a saw wave. I filtered down the saw wave just a little bit, and I added some tube distortion. That's all. And then I added shaper box to sidechain that to the kick, which is playing on a quarter note. Pre 2 is actually pretty much the same as pre 1, except for this one effect. I rendered the bass from verse 2 to audio, reversed it, added a little bit of decapitator and automated it up so that the distortion was hitting towards the end. And then I actually went into the clip and dipped it by 12 semitones at the end, so that's where you hear that kind of swoop down right there. Final chorus is pretty much just like everything layered on top of each other. I took the synth from verse 2, the drums from verse 2, as well as the impacts from chorus 1 here. A little bit about the vocals. What's going on here is we layered so many of Aimee's vocals. These are pretty much just like doubles, harmonies, a couple of the leads pitch shifted and formatted all over the place. One thing that we did to add a little bit more space to was Aimee literally like yelled into the mic, and this is what those yells sound like. Just to give it that kind of like rock and roll factor. I layered that all together with the bass hits and Aimee's vocal, and this is what it sounds like.
Tell it to my voicemail. You can talk to
The outro, it's pretty much just the same thing as the intro, but we actually in the session had Aimee call me on my phone, and then I just didn't pick up, and we recorded that into the session.
Your call has been forwarded to an automated voice messaging system.
Thank you so much. Remember to like, comment, and subscribe. Hopefully I'll be doing many more of these, and if you have any specific requests, please just let me know in the comments. Also, if you subscribe to my mailing list, you'll get all of these serum presets for free.